India and South Asia will be victims of climate change impacts.
Global emissions became zero tomorrow. Would climate change stop? No.
83% of the climate variability is caused by nature, and we human beings have a control on only 17%.
You will hear constantly from the Western media that China is today the world's leading polluter. But what the Western media never qualifies is that China has 20% of the world population. Okay? US, which is the second largest and of course on a historical basis, the largest, the most gluttonous polluter, emitter, has 20%, very close to China in terms of emissions, but only has 5% of the world population. And that's very important for us to understand. There are more countries where their emissions have been reduced at the bottom, if you see. Now, that is largely because of financial recession in most of these countries that has happened. But the fact is that each one of these countries is spending money on fiscal stimulus to grow and not to green. So there is no reason to believe that there will be any transition, that they are actually reducing emissions. And yet, if you look at it, this table shows you the US has increased 18%. And if I look at the table that is in front of me, it also says that the US has increased by 13%. So in spite of the recession, over this period, in spite of everything, their emissions have still increased. And that is really the bottom line of what is at stake today in the world. Now the reason this is so, and the second part of my policy, as I said, the second part is they want to move the transition to us. Why? The reason is very clear, that climate change is linked to economic growth. If you look at it over here, electricity and heat is 35% of the emissions. This is carbon dioxide emissions. Manufacturing and construction is 15%. Transportation is 15%. Fuel combustion is 9%. Industrial processes is 3%. Agriculture is 16%. Waste is 4%. And international bunkers is 3%. So if you look at it from here, electricity, manufacturing, transportation, fuel, industry, this entire set of the pie is directly linked to what we know is economic growth. So as a result of it, when we look at climate change, and one of the key reasons why the world is finding it so difficult to make this transition is because these emissions are directly linked to what we call growth. Think back about this, that in spite of legal commitments, their emissions, even with the financial recession, have increased by 8%. And the reason is very clear. No part of the world they have not been able to reinvent growth without pollution. Growth which is low carbon as yet. We also know that climate change is about sharing growth. So if it is linked to economic growth, the politics of climate change become more difficult, because for the first time the world is being told that yes, this is something that is linked to economic growth, and the world has to share economic growth between nations and between people. So the fact of the matter today is that the tough part of the politics is that we will have to increase our emissions as we grow. Countries like India, countries like Pakistan, countries like Bangladesh, countries like Sri Lanka cannot under any circumstances grow economically without increasing emissions.